Hey everyone, welcome to my 35,000 subscriber special video. The game plan for this video is to watch the special bonus video that was unlocked by my patrons over on Patreon. Then I'll be announcing some fun new rewards for people who decide to join my Patreon. And then we'll have a very lengthy Q&A with way too many questions. And now let's watch that classic Jose episode from back in 2017 where I decided to discuss the scourge of ironic Nazis. A few notes before we start the video. Number one, the audio is very bad. Very, very bad. I almost recorded the whole thing again, but I feel like that kind of loses the whole point of it being an old video. You'll also be able to tell that my style is a bit different. Overall, I think the video actually holds up. Also, I say the word ironic very strangely inside it. I wasn't actually trying for an accent back then. It was just trying to imitate a funnier podcast that I had seen in the past. Enjoy and brace yourself for the audio.
Lately, there's been an outbreak of a certain type of jokesters on YouTube. People who love getting a rise out of others by adopting the vocabulary, attitudes, imagery, and music of history's most playful, silly authoritarian regime, the Third Reich. It's almost like we've gone back to the 1930s. Nazis invade YouTube. Wait, excuse me. Ironic Nazis. Because nowadays it seems like you can't be a real Nazi unless you're literally throwing someone into an oven. And even then someone might ask if they deserved it or not. But let's pretend what we've mostly gotten is an outbreak of the ironic Nazis. People who love living well past the edge of good taste and revel in schlocky shock humor. A few commentators have pointed out this trend already, but as someone who likes telling stories, I wanted to try relating one of my own as a cautionary tale. And we have to start in an unlikely place. This is Bon Jovi. That's right. Drink it in. When Bon Jovi isn't culturally appropriating cigarette advertising for their albums, they're producing the rock albums that have kept them relevant for a decade. Throughout their 30-year career, they've had to weather some tough criticisms, namely the one my friends and I came up with 10 years ago when we concluded that Bon Jovi is the most generic rock band in history. So, we began to mock them. Started off with some sneering and jokes at their expense, but being the sophisticated cats we were, we eventually moved on to the much sharper tool of belittling them. We became ironic Bon Jovi fans. With that move, we entered a golden age of comedy. There's no line that could not be crossed, no bar that could not be topped. When someone said Bon Jovi's music retroactively became the best music of the 1950s, someone had to correct them and say Bon Jovi's sweet sounds are the reason we evolved to have ears. There were no limits, and we kept going deeper. We were buying Bon Jovi albums, learning the lyrics to their music, and even went to one of their concerts. I remember by the end of that night, we were hoarse from singing along to Livin' on a Prayer as the concert came to an end. Or, in other words, we actually had a lot of fun. And maybe it was because of that fun that we sort of realized something that night. We realized that our ironic performance had taken us so far that we had, in fact, become Bon Jovi fans. I went from the guy who sneered at their music to the one who sings at least one Bon Jovi song every time I'm at karaoke. I went from changing the station when they were on to memorizing their lyrics to more songs than I really feel comfortable admitting in public. I had become and have become the thing I was pretending to be. Now, my little ironic Nazis, you may be saying to yourself, you would never go so far as to become an actual Nazi. My analogy is silly and I should gas myself. I might have said something similar in my early days of being an ironic Bon Jovi fan. But here's an interesting point to consider. I am not and will never likely be so silly as to think our ears evolved to listen to the music of Bon Jovi. While I am always down to sing Wanted Dead or Alive, I don't feel the need to see Bon Jovi whenever they're in town either. In other words, my Jovi fandom is the mild sort of casual fan, which is a far cry from the super fandom I pretended. Think to yourself, has all this good-natured memeing around led you to start believing some new ideas you had never considered? Perhaps you find yourself talking about how multiculturalism can only fail and Ethnic homogeneity is essential to keep society functioning. Perhaps you're starting to think that there are some cultures that are barbaric or so morally reprehensible that anyone from said culture must be regarded with suspicion or kept away at all costs. No doubt you have rationalizations for your new ideas, that they're not as bad as Nazism, and that might even be true. But do you wonder why they sound so similar? Is it possible your ironic Nazism is gradually turning into a soft Nazism? I hope people who drape themselves in the colors of some of history's worst monsters stop and ask themselves what all that pretending means and where it might take them. If you're finding your moral development is being increasingly informed by a group of people you know is repulsive, maybe you need to start asking yourself what you really believed in the first place. This video isn't designed to be an accusation. I'm steering away from calling out any ideologies that have been conflated with Nazism on purpose to focus on how some people like to deploy Nazi themes for a laugh instead. I'm just hoping people will perhaps stop and think about what they're doing and saying. I know that's not very popular when we all look to YouTube personalities to do the thinking for us, but maybe they don't always have the answers. And no, I'm actually not trying to be an ironic YouTuber myself. If you can tell me how wrong I am without resorting to name calling and spamming memes, I'll at least be relieved you're thinking for yourself, even if you are wrong. At the end of my journey into irony, I ended up the fan of a rock band known for catchy music and simple lyrics. What will you end up with at the end of yours? And I feel like we need to end on the words of a great poet. Take a look around you, nothing's what it seems. We're living in the broken home of hopes and dreams. Let me be the first to shake a helping hand. Anybody brave enough to take a stand. I've knocked on every door on every dead-end street, looking for forgiveness, what's left to believe.
I hope you all enjoyed that. Rewatching it, it actually held up better than I thought it would. For a little 6-minute video, it's not too bad. And I am 100% comfortable with everyone knowing that I'm a Bon Jovi fan. I can live with this. Now let's get on to the new patron rewards. I have 2 types of rewards that will now be available on my Patreon. The first is an exclusive download of my theme song. I'll have some more details on the background of this song in the Q&A since some people asked about it. But if you've ever wanted a copy of your own to listen to, this will be your chance. And if you're worried about the artist, who happens to be a friend of mine, she'll be getting a percentage of the first month of your donation. And if you really want to give her a little bit extra, just leave a note when you become one of my patrons and say, give this extra money to your lovely singer. The second new reward is one that's being used by a lot of other people, so it's not quite as fun or creative, but it will be super useful, at least to me. And that's letting patrons see videos a few days early. I kind of resisted this one because I would prefer everyone seeing a video at the same time with no one getting preferential treatment, but I'm actually viewing these releases as something of a test case, so what I'm hoping for is that my patrons will offer me some early feedback, letting me edit and modify and just fix up any small mistakes that appear in videos, so when the final version comes out, it'll be nice and not filled with any silly mistakes. And if you're wondering what new expensive tier all of this will be for, the answer is no new tier. Both of these new rewards are being added to the $5 tier. Of course, if you'd like to give me more than that, that's always an option, but there won't be any additional rewards for it, at least not for the time being. Now it's time for the Q&A. The first question comes from over on Patreon from one of my patrons, Liz Castro. She writes, "Congrats! I am curious, given the breadth of your research for your videos, were you involved in academia or publishing prior to becoming a YouTube creator? I myself am a teacher and thoroughly appreciate your attention to detail and conscientious citations." I'm trying to maintain a degree of anonymity here, so I won't discuss my professional life too much. But before that, I was enrolled in university and have a background in both English and psychology. I had a double major in my undergrad years. I considered going into a master's program, but for a number of reasons, it just wasn't a good option for me. I've always had a healthy respect for academia and very much appreciate the process and the effort people go to make sure their work is properly cited and grounded in appropriate sources. If that's reflected in my work, I'm glad that people are noticing that. A number of questions were asked on my YouTube channel, so I am going to go through those in the order that they were asked. The first is, I have question, what are your thoughts on Balkan politics and will you make video on it? I assume this is from a viewer in the Balkans, and I have to admit I don't know a lot about Balkan politics. I believe I would have to spend a lot of time researching and learning about it. And to be honest, I probably won't ever get around to doing something like that, mostly because this is something that would take years to do if I was going to do it properly. And one of my pet peeves on YouTube is seeing people talk about things that they know little or nothing about. I never want to be one of those people. Next question. Are you friends with any right-wing people? Yes, in fact, I have a couple of friends who are rather right-wing, including family members. And that's always interesting when politics comes up. Thankfully, none of the right-wing people I know have especially noxious or terrible opinions, so there's never been too much trouble. I'll share a brief story. About a month ago, I had some family visiting from out of town, and they came and they wanted to do something festive in the city. So my idea was to go to a special pop-up bar that had a Christmas theme here in Toronto. It was a fun time. It was all fancy and dressed up, and they had specialty cocktails, and we were all having a little fun. Later that evening, there was going to be a show, though, and one of the people who worked there went around, was letting everyone know there'd be a show that night. Of course, I knew about it, and I was just waiting to see my cousin's reaction, because when the staff member came by and said it would be a drag show, his eyes just popped out of his head, and he was like, a drag show? And I just couldn't stop laughing. It was probably my favorite part of the whole night. Okay, next question. Do you feel any sort of pressure to hide any opinions you have because of fear of losing fans/patrons? Even if you don't do it, do you at least consider it? Let me first address patrons. My patrons are actually surprisingly quiet. If you go over to my Patreon, you'll see there aren't that many comments, and I get almost no messages from my patrons. I actually kind of like that. They have this silent support for me, and I appreciate it. I do hope they're a bit more vocal when it comes time to offering me some feedback for our early videos before they go live. But other than that, I appreciate having supporters who are willing to financially back my work without trying to influence it or push it too much one way or another. With regard to the YouTube audience as a whole and any pressure I feel from them, I think pretty much any YouTube creator will feel a degree of pressure one way or the other when it comes to certain types of opinions. That said, when I look at the reactions from my audience, they're usually pretty positive, and I feel as though if I go in a certain direction that maybe they aren't used to or don't expect, I generally receive support more often than not, and I've never gone about making any particular video thinking, I'm not sure people will appreciate this, or this is a topic I shouldn't touch because it might annoy my audience. If anything, I feel like I'm rewarded for taking chances like that. When my channel really blew up with that Roseanne video, that was me taking a chance because I wasn't sure anyone wanted to listen to me talk about a sitcom from the 1980s and 90s. And it turns out they did. And the lesson I learned is it's good to take chances and try and make something, even if you think your audience might not be down for it. That said, there are moments when I'm making videos and I cut out certain lines and certain turns of phrase, sometimes entire sections, usually because I think it'll be bad and people will think it's boring or uninteresting. Sometimes I'm worried about things being a little too mean, a little too gruff. When I look at the reactions from my audience, I like the warm, positive ones rather than the sort of angry, positive ones, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to be aware of the audience I'm cultivating, and I don't ever want it to be one where I feel like I am fearful of them, fearful of losing viewers or patrons. And if I feel myself moving in that direction, I'll feel as though I'm doing something wrong. And right now, at least, I don't feel like I'm quite in that space. Next question. Are you a socialist, a soc dem, or just a liberal? Well, definitely not just a liberal, so we can cross that off the list. I tend to think of politics in two different ways. The practical reality of electoral politics and the broader ideology that informs my vision of how I would like the world to be. So when it comes to practical politics and trying to implement policies, I tend to act as a social democrat. If an election is up, I will vote for the candidate who will represent policies that will move the country further to the left. I know it's not perfect, and some people get frustrated that politicians are lagging behind where they would like the left to be in the mainstream, but I think small improvements are better than no improvements, and I think there's a real danger of sitting out in elections because they have consequences. Even if they don't affect you, other people are affected by these policies, and we owe it to one another to always try and make the world a better place when we have the opportunity. As for the long-term goals, you could probably say I'm closer to a socialist. Generally speaking, I try not to be tied down to any sort of specific ideology, and we have to be aware that there are going to be changes and shifts to our society that will make frameworks we have today not quite or not necessarily applicable to that much different tomorrow. Like climate change, that was something that has to be accommodated into any sort of framework we're going to have for the future, and who knows what other sorts of challenges might lie ahead of us. Next question. Do you hobby birdwatching? You like birds? I've actually never gone bird watching. As for liking birds, yes, I do like birds. I don't have any specific affinity towards birds, believe it or not. I actually love all animals, so birds are also animals and are great. Next question. What is your take on veganism and animal agriculture? I am actually a vegetarian and have been for about 1.5 years now. It's been surprisingly easy because I was never a huge meat eater to begin with, so cutting it out was relatively simple, although it's sometimes tough to eat out, which is a bit frustrating. Veganism is great. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it that far. I'd like to. There is a version of animal agriculture that can be done humanely and without cruelty, and in a way might need to be done for certain domesticated animals that can't live in the wild anymore. That said, that's not what we have at all, and animals are really horribly treated. While I'm not about to go around slapping burgers out of people's hands, I would recommend, if you do eat meat, maybe cut down a little bit. Not just for the sake of the animals, but also the environment. It has a pretty hefty toll. Lots of great channels out there can explain it better than I can. Next question. Would you rather French kiss a poodle or cuddle a wild raccoon? I assume these are both consensual things because I would do neither if the animal wasn't up for it. So I'd probably go with cuddle a wild raccoon because I think it would be weird to open mouth kiss a dog. Next question. What prompted you to start this channel? I saw a increasing amount of reactionary content on YouTube, and it was really starting to annoy me, so I wanted to push back against that. Honestly, for a while, I wasn't sure if I was capable of doing something like this, but considering the caliber of the opposition, really anyone can debunk some of this garbage that's spewed out there. And from there, I've just been experimenting and trying new things, and building a channel that's got some cool different stuff on it now. Next. What do you think is going to stop people from falling for demagogues? Nothing. I think demagogues are always going to be an issue and always a problem. As for what people can do, there are some general tips and advice, and that's to try and be as educated as possible when it comes to listening to a passionate speaker. Ask yourself the question, if this is something they're so passionate about and I'm so passionate about, why am I simply sitting here letting this person educate me when I could go out there and use my passion for this subject to educate myself? And you might find that this person who speaks with such passion is actually full of crap, and you just ID'd a demagogue. Congratulations. Next. Your profile picture looks like a blue jay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why did you choose this? It is a blue jay, and why I chose this was actually pretty random. I drew this picture back when I started my channel. I had actually been trying to teach myself to draw for about 1 year or 2 when I drew that, and it was actually my first time trying to draw a blue jay and my first time ever digitally coloring anything. And when I made my channel, I knew I wasn't just going to take a picture of my face. I wanted to have some graphic or image, and I was really worried about taking someone else's, so I just took this picture, which was mine, and I thought it was pretty cute, and I figured, what the heck, I'll use it. I originally had it as part of the name of this channel, but I got rid of that pretty quickly and just switched the name to Jose because that's so much easier. Next, what's your favorite animated film? Princess Mononoke, which is actually my favorite movie entirely. Maybe I'll do a video about it someday, who knows. Which languages do you speak? English. A little bit of French, but it gets worse every year because I never use it. And I understand some Spanish, usually just when Someone is yelling at me. Next, what do you think of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life? I have not read it. The only familiarity I have with it is I watched the videos by Hannah and Jake discussing it. It seems kind of dopey and a cheap way to smuggle in some Christianity into people's lives. I don't really like self-help books, and I like religious self-help books even less. Probably going to skip this one. What's an example of a movie that you think is really underrated? I wish I had really cool, unique tastes in movies, but I don't really. Maybe Children of Men. I feel like that's a movie that was a big deal when it came out, but then just got quickly forgotten. It stars Clive Owen in a post-apocalyptic future where no new children are being born. It's really good. Do you ever plan on doing live streams or debate discussions with people on the other side? No, not in any time in the near future. Most people on the other side, I'm going to be totally honest, I don't think approach live streams or these debate discussions in a way that's helpful. I don't just mean the people who are adversarial and see it as an attempt to just dunk on the other side and try and make someone look like a fool in real time. Even if someone comes in good faith to have a genuine discussion or debate, I don't think they're going to become armed with enough research or material to make it worthwhile. You'd basically see me show up with as much as I could find, speaking to someone who will just pivot, ignore, and shoot out talking points, and it would be a waste of time. I feel like it would be easier just to respond to their videos, because at least then I don't have someone changing the subject just as I get going on something because they realize they have no response to anything I'm bringing up. Or at least I won't have to deal with responses that are completely incongruent with what I'm saying. Are you planning on doing more videos about comics? Yes, definitely. I was actually supposed to have a comic book related video in either late December or early January. I got about 2/3 of the way through the script when I realized I wasn't saying anything new or interesting. I was just looking for an excuse to talk about a certain Avengers comic. I still might do it in the future if I can find a more worthwhile bit of commentary. I don't want to just create videos for the sake of creating videos. I want it to be a little more worthwhile. As far as big videos, like the Secret Empire one, I'd need to find another big event I'd want to cover like that again. Although it was kind of fun featuring all those different voices in there and having a really big video discussing comics. I might do that again in the future. We'll see. Congrats on 35K, Jose. Have you ever thought about making a video on GamerGate like you did on Comicsgate? Keep up the good work. Yes, I have. I kind of want to do this. It's going to be an enormous project, and it's going to be painful. It'll be more of an autopsy, I guess, because GamerGate's pretty dead right now, right? It's dead, huh? I hope so. What's your hottest take? Ooh, good question. One day I might have to do a video about how Batman is terrible, and there are almost no good Batman stories, and I say that as someone who has read a lot of them. It's not even the usual, like, ooh, Batman's a fascist, he's a rich white male, he's actually a conservative dream, libertarian, etc., etc. No, I just think a lot of Batman stories suck, and they just read like fan fiction because most writers are fans of Batman. Even if you are atheistic, what's your favorite deity? That is a good question. I always thought Poseidon was really cool, Greek god of the sea. He always seemed to get downplayed a little. In most stories about Greek mythology, people are more interested in Zeus or Ares, maybe Athena, but why not Poseidon? He's got the whole ocean. The ocean's pretty neat. Next question. What method do you believe would be effective in showing progressives that they are becoming the Tea Party of the left? First of all, you're assuming I buy into that premise. The Tea Party, for those who don't know, was a very right-wing group that emerged in conservative politics in 2009, 2010, thereabouts. It was very much a response to the election of Barack Obama, but it was supposedly more about the out-of-control spending and the massive debt and deficit. As for the comparisons to the Tea Party, I can see what people are saying in that it seems to be on the extreme left of the spectrum. I think pushing further left is actually a good thing. When it comes to certain tactics, though, there is something to be said about elements on the left that give the left a bad name, and really the difficulty is finding a way to criticize that in a way that isn't helpful to the right and becoming a useful idiot like Tim Pool or Dave Rubin. I'm actually working on a video. It's still just a germ of an idea, and I'm just not sure the best way of doing this. But a video on how to critique the left in a way that will make it better rather than just try and tear it down like some secret right-wing operative. If you want to see a good example of that, Mexi actually had a video about that. The name is blanking on me at the moment, but I'll put it on the screen and there'll be a link somewhere. I think we need more of that, more ways of not necessarily making sure everyone on the left believes the same thing, but that we are all pushing in the same direction and see each other as allies. Next. Do you agree rats greater than blue jays? Of course you do. What is your take on political violence? First of all, no, I don't agree that rats are greater than blue jays. I would put them equal because I try not to be an animal supremacist, okay? Okay. Well, my take on political violence, in defense, I think it's absolutely vital and necessary. There are a lot of rough groups out there, and I think if you're marching against certain groups and you know certain elements will be there, it's important to defend yourself. The police might not necessarily have your back or be there in time. That said, I abhor political violence more broadly, and I don't believe it's an especially great tool when there are avenues to express or to enact actual change. People might not like electoral politics, but it has been shown to change, and it's far more effective than political violence in the system we have now. I'm also skeptical of more revolutionary types of violence that roll out the guillotine and start chopping people's heads off, because well, revolutions are very turbulent and you never know what you're going to get, and it's important to look at the population around you. I would advise any violent revolutionary or anyone who advocates political violence to look at the other side, look at how many there are of them and to what degree they are armed, and ask yourself what the result of open combat or violence would be here. I think it's better to persuade people non-violently to our side. And ironically enough, once we have all those people on our side, we won't need violence anymore because electoral politics will become more powerful. What is your favorite book or best book you've read? One of my all-time favorites is Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire. Really great book about the invasive nature of literary criticism. More recently, I really enjoyed the memoir Educated by Tara Westover. Very stirring story about a woman who grew up in a very restrictive environment. If you want something a little more fun, I would recommend the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I had a lot of fun reading those too. I want to read more Brandon Sanderson, but it's hard to find the time when you're... Oh god, I'm just thinking about the horrible conservative novel I have to start reading. That's going to be fun. Are there any conservative content creators you respect? I assume that means respect. On YouTube, I'm going to go with no. There are conservative commentators who I generally not necessarily enjoy, but honestly disagree with. On YouTube, no. What is the most painful right-wing YouTuber you've ever watched? Oh, that's kind of convenient. These questions are so close. I would probably say no bullshit. I'm sure there have been singular videos from other people who are worse, but his content is just so completely devoid of anything. It's just the most asinine, superficial stuff I've ever seen. I haven't watched it in a while. Maybe he's gotten better. I doubt it. His stuff blows. I just cannot watch it. Okay, let's move on to the Curious Cat questions. What's your process making media analysis videos? I rewatch your sitcom analysis and Secret Empire videos all the time. They're so well made, and I'd love to know how they happen. Ha. Also, would you ever make a video on Frasier? Love your channel. First of all, thank you. I always appreciate that. As for the process, when it comes to either watching a TV show or reading a comic book event, I watch and read all of it while taking copious notes, either little things I notice, maybe funny jokes, any recurring patterns or themes or ideas. While taking those notes, I always include timestamps, page numbers, whatever I need to make sure that the section I'm referring to can be easily found again when I'm actually writing the script and then editing together the video. It sucks to mention a certain scene or moment or line that you then have to hunt for because you totally forgot where it was 200 episodes of a sitcom ago. When I get to the end, I might rewatch certain key sections or moments, and I usually mark that stuff out ahead of time, but I'll try to look over the whole thing just in case there's anything I missed. After that, I will then go about putting together a script. How I organize it depends on what I'm talking about. Sometimes I'll just go through things chronologically. usually, because that's the easiest way to do it, but I also like pulling out specific touchstones or themes to certain sections. I try to create these videos for people who have either watched or read what I'm talking about or haven't, so I try to offer as many handholds as possible when it comes to the plot and the characters, just to make sure everyone is on board and following along. And then I try to probe a little deeper, digging further into what the central themes and ideas being explored are. As for a Frasier video, it's possible. I've been asked for a Frasier and Cheers one in the past, and I'd probably want to make back-to-back videos about those. Who knows, maybe in the future. I don't have any plans at the moment, though. Next question. What is your ideal partner? One thing I would appreciate in an ideal partner is a healthy sense of curiosity. I think someone who has questions about the world and is willing to try and figure them out is quite admirable, and something I like to think I do myself. I also appreciate warmth and kindness, and a big heart really matters to me. Also someone with a healthy sense of adventure. I like traveling, I like seeing the world. Don't always have the opportunity to do it, but when I do, I'd like to have someone who's willing to go on those adventures with me. Next, do you like snow? I like snow. One of my favorite times of year is a cool winter night, not too cold, with snow falling is really beautiful, and you really get a sense of quiet and peacefulness in moments like that, even in the city. So I do have a lot of love for snow. Hello, Jose. I was wondering, since you make analyses on sitcoms, what are some of your personal favorites? Ooh, good question. I have very boring favorites when it comes to sitcoms. The Simpsons is one of my all-time favorite TV shows. I also really enjoyed Seinfeld. I wish I could offer some more obscure and strange choices, but, it is what it is. Next, are you looking to make YouTube more of a career or just something you do on the side? Well, right now it's on the side because I simply don't make enough to make it a career. If enough people start giving to my Patreon, sure, it's something I would consider. Next, what were your thoughts on the Canadian election? Considering the range of possibilities, which I think we got somewhere in the middle, a compromise that satisfies no one, we were looking at a possible conservative minority. So I think avoiding that is a huge win, even though I'm not really a huge fan of the Liberal Party or Justin Trudeau specifically. That said, the loss of all those NDP seats is certainly going to hurt the leftist project in Canada. Hopefully the next election will be a push back towards the left. We'll see. Conservatives really blow and are bad at elections, so I guess I'm just grateful for that, because the way the wind was blowing, that election could have gone much worse. Next, will you ever do a leftist analysis on a movie instead of a sitcom? I don't have any planned right now. A movie would be so much easier than a sitcom because it's just one thing to watch instead of several hundred small things. It's just a question of which movie, because movies are so overdone on YouTube that I'd want to find one that people aren't talking about. I have a few in mind I'd like to do, but I would have to do some preliminary research to make sure no one said what I have in mind, because I never like being the second person to make a point. Thoughts on Nick Fuentes? Maybe you could do a video analyzing him like you analyzed Tim Pool. That's unlikely. The issue with Nick Fuentes is that I saw this one clip of him discussing tactics, and one of those tactics involved a very loose relationship with the truth and the idea that you can say or do whatever you want as long as it's advancing your cause, and you don't have to hold yourself to any sort of personal standard as long as you're advancing the cause. And that really just summed up why people like that aren't necessarily worth engaging. If he becomes more relevant, maybe I'll make a video about him, but he seems pretty fringe at the moment. Thoughts on Ronald Reagan? It's weird that he's become a deity of sorts, even though most of his policies were pretty bad, and his victory over the Soviet Union has been wildly exaggerated. And it really shows the power of the modern conservative echo chamber to deify a man who, while popular, was not a great president. I wonder if we'll see that happen again with the current man in charge. Next, who are your influences when making YouTube content? Who do you perceive as the influences on your beliefs? Well, for YouTube content, I think it's pretty obvious. I owe a debt to the YouTuber Sean, who, as we all know, invented the whole idea of talking and not appearing on camera. Before then, it just was not a thing, right? Potholer54, for instance, is a YouTuber I have a lot of respect for. Also an influence on how I make my content. The way he approaches his work, His dogged attempts to engage with research and to portray people honestly is something I really respect, and to do it in a fun, entertaining way. I think everything has a degree of influence on you one way or the other. I could say, for instance, Dave Rubin had a massive influence on me on what not to do. And that is to never do anything that ever resembles Dave Rubin's work ever, lest I start hating myself uncontrollably. As for influences on my beliefs, there are a lot of them. A lot of what I believe now is influenced by the life I've led, the people I've met in my personal life, the books I've read, the things I've learned about the world, and generally just trying to keep a positive attitude to the world around me. Not necessarily a positive in the terms of being happy, but positive in wanting the best for the world. Next, what is your introduction song? I like the voice. For that one, I actually got my friend Dana to record a little answer, so let's let her handle this one.
Hey, it's Dana. I recorded the intro and outro music for Jose's videos, which was truly such an honor, and oh my god, I'm on a Q&A now. Am I famous for this? Hi, channel! Anyway, let's get into this. So the song is Untitled, but I think if I had to call it something, I would call it what could have been a beautiful love letter to a long and amazing friendship. But Jose demanded we cut it down to about 3 seconds. By Dana. And also kind of by Jose. But actually, thank you so much. Every time you guys say something sweet about me, Jose screenshots and sends it to me. And every time you say something not so nice, he screenshots and texts that to me as well. So don't think that I don't see you. Just kidding. You guys are so nice and you make me blush all the time. So just thank you so much. I'm really pleased that you liked the song. Bye.
So thank you for that, Dana. Next, have you heard of ContraPoints? She's a trans YouTuber who was recently cancelled due to hiring transphobe Buck Angel to do a 10-second voice clip. There's more to the story, of course, but I was wondering what your opinions on the controversy were, if any, and or if you'd be willing to do a video on it/ContraPoints, not to bring her down, but offer a calmer opinion on the events. To answer the first part of the question, yes, I have heard of the ContraPoints channel. I've been a viewer for a very long time and have enjoyed many of our videos. As for the second part of that question, as to whether or not I will make a video about that whole controversy, I will absolutely not be doing that. It seems like a very intense war that does more harm than good in the division it sows amongst people. I will say this, there should always be a space to offer friendly and constructive criticism of any YouTuber and the choices they make in their videos. So long as people are doing that respectfully and with the effort to get someone to improve, that's only ever a good thing. Next, do you own any blue jays? If not, what birds do you own? I don't think you can legally own a blue jay. I don't think it's a bird that's been domesticated. I don't own any birds. I don't plan to own any birds. I am uncomfortable with the idea of owning birds myself because I don't like the idea of caging them. Birds can fly free through the sky and I can't imagine them liking their cages. If you're a bird owner, I hope you treat them kindly and with love and affection. I'm very open to the idea of having a bird friend that lives in my backyard or flies around and maybe shows up every now and again for some seed and to hang out. But that's as far as I'd go with a bird relationship. Next, how does Canada determine who wins an election? Because in the United States, we have the Electoral College, who is a body of electors established by the United States Constitution, which forms every 4 years for the sole purpose of electing the President and Vice President of the United States. It has a lot of flaws, like the existence of swing states and giving small more votes and more power despite a small percentage living there. In fact, I learned from CGP Grey that the President can win the Electoral College with only 22% of the popular vote. Is the way Canada determines election more fair than the US? Personally, I think so. In Canada, we have a parliamentary system. So the idea is whichever political party wins the most seats in election, the leader of that party becomes the prime minister. There's also the possibility if you don't win enough seats to form a majority or even a clear minority, there's also the possibility of coalition governments forming where two parties can combine their forces and name a prime minister and form a government together. Although that's pretty rare. In Canada, we almost never have coalition governments. I also think it's neat that the leaders of the parties actually have to run in specific ridings. So we've had cases like in our previous election where Maxime Bernier, who was the leader of the People's Party of Canada, also known as the far-right anti-immigration party, he actually lost in his riding, so he doesn't even get to be in parliament, which is awesome. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Even if your party loses, if you're the leader of the party, effectively running for the prime ministership, you can still be in the government, but you would just be a member of parliament. You probably wouldn't be the leader of your party come the next election either. Next, do you believe in the deep state? Sort of, in the sense that there are career bureaucrats who work within governments through most of their lives and will carry with them certain opinions and political positions. Sure, but I think the term deep state is often weaponized by administrations to filter out these career bureaucrats and instead replace them with lackeys who will just operate as ideological tools. If we're going to truly combat the deep state, or I should say the entrenched wisdom within political structures, it needs to be done in a way that isn't so in terms of partisan hackery. Are there any video games that you like? Let's keep it to more recent games. I just finished playing God of War, which I kind of want to do a video on. There's so much to say there. I think that one's been done to death. One of my favorite games of all time is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That felt like I was playing the future. Mario Galaxy 2 is one of my absolute favorites. Persona 4, Metal Gear Solid, even the Twin Snakes version. Snake Eater, though, is probably my favorite of that series. Elite Beat Agents or any sort of music game is something I can get down for. I actually nearly made a video for my channel about No More Heroes, which I think is one of the best examples of video games as art. But then I noticed there's a channel out there, oh god, I don't even remember the name of the channel or the name of the video, but it did a look at No More Heroes that said everything that I want to say, so I thought, it's been said, and then I didn't make the video. I might make one on video games at some point in the future, but I'm not in a rush. Next, do you think these right-wingers will ever lose their fame? They are just dominating the internet. I think a lot of them actually have, especially the ones that have been around for years and years. A lot of them seem to have carved out these little fiefdoms, and while they do have viewership and some success, they don't have the relevance they once did. Of course, there's an endless stream of them, and they just seem to cycle them out as old ones lose their luster. I don't think we should ever count on them just losing their fame. That's why part of the reason I made this channel is to push back against it. And I'm so encouraged by all the new left-wing channels I've seen appear since I started making mine. Not that I think mine is necessarily influencing any specific ones. I'm just glad that there are more voices because this truly is an all-hands-on-deck type of situation. And the more we push back against it, the better. And it's always easier to push back when you're doing it with a lot of people. Next, have you thought about exploring Kaitlyn Bennett and her horrible content? For those who don't know, this is the gun girl. She showed up to some college with an assault rifle and she took photographs of her walking around, and she was instantly the poster girl for many conservatives, and she now goes around for InfoWars interviewing college students, asking them questions, and then they just humiliate her with their responses. It's kind of like the opposite of Steven Crowder's thing, where he goes out and tries to make them look stupid, and usually by using his deceptive tactics can do that. Kaitlyn Bennett isn't nearly as capable, and she just ends up looking like an idiot. I don't think I need to make a video of it. I think just watching one of her videos is enough to embarrass her. Next, do you think capitalism will fall sometime in this century? Ooh, since we're only about 20 years in, it's possible. Think about the end of capitalism, which I generally like the sound of. It needs to be done by people who are ready for it. By that I mean, it's something we all have to buy into rather than something that will create a top-down improvement in the world. I think there has to be a degree of bottom-up buying into, so to speak, of a post-capitalism world. That's a lot of hearts and minds to change. Can we get there by the end of the century? I think we have to try. Will it happen, though? I'm not that optimistic. Next, where do you go for unbiased news? What about biased/entertaining news? I go nowhere for unbiased news. Here's a newsflash, all news is biased. What I try to do is find news that can be sourced. When I say biased news, I should clarify, I don't mean the sort of stupid left-right-wing bias that people talk about. A lot of mainstream media isn't as left-biased as people pretend it is. It's more biased toward the status quo. So generally speaking, I think any news that can inform you is helpful, regardless of its bias. The more extreme its bias, it gets tougher because often that includes distorting things through some kind of funhouse mirror. What I would recommend is always look for news that can be adequately sourced to some primary source of information. If it mentions a poll, for instance, if it, instead of like sending you to blog after blog after blog and eventually finding the poll, something that links directly to the poll is better. Better still is checking out that poll for yourself and seeing how accurately the article in question represents it. Same thing for interviews or descriptions of events. And there's the old reporter's adage of believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. It's always good to be skeptical, but that said, if someone can demonstrate something is true, I suggest you believe it and not just write it off as fake news because it might be something you don't agree with. Another little axiom that might be helpful: the truth does not change in accordance with our ability to stomach it. That's from Flannery O'Connor. Are there any anime and manga that you like? Yes, definitely, loads. My favorite TV series of all time, not just anime, is Nana. Favorite manga too, by the way. It is so good. I will make a video about this one day. I kind of hope the series ends before I do, but it's been on hiatus for 8 years, so who knows. But there's loads of others I enjoyed. Cowboy Bebop is one of my all-time favorites. Also a big fan of Gundam Seed, best Gundam, don't care what anyone says. I just watched Carol and Tuesday. That was fantastic. More people should check that out. Great music. Kids on the Slope is really good, and I even like things not by Shinichiro Watanabe. Anything by Studio Ghibli, obviously. I mentioned Princess Mononoke, but Grave of the Fireflies is also fantastic. Spirited Away. Manga-wise, let's give a shout-out to Monster by Naoki Urasawa, which is true work of art. I might make a video of that someday, too. I also like Yosuba, which is a great manga. I don't know if they made that into an anime yet. They should. I also have a soft spot for shonen manga and anime, although it's very hard to watch it and make time. Though I do try to keep up with World Trigger, which I really enjoy. I love your content. Thank you. I have 2 questions. 1, are there any alt-right YouTubers you have a morbid fascination with? 2, I really loved your Roseanne analysis. Do you have any other shows that you think would be worth a rewatch? If I've made a video on someone, I probably have some degree of fascination with them. I don't know if I'd call it morbid, though. I'm pretty good at disconnecting from the alt-right space when I'm not actively working on something. As for the second one, if I make a video on something, you can assume I think it's probably worth a rewatch. And I've got another sitcom video in the works, and I will say that's worth a rewatch too, but with some caveats. These are all big shows, so sometimes it's better to just check out certain episodes, and I try to highlight them as I go along. There are lots of great shows to rewatch, though. I'm just going to put a bunch on screen. Pick any of those. Sure. They're good. Dumb question alert. If you live in Toronto and have a JPFP, then was your channel inspired by the Toronto Blue Jays? No. I just think Blue Jays are really cool. The team's fine. The similarity to the Blue Jay logos is a coincidence. It just happens that the bird looks like the logo, and I'll put them side by side and you can see the similarity. But you know what I'm also going to show you all? The original photo that my drawing was inspired by. This was the image I was trying to recreate in my own unique style. Next, how do you pronounce your channel name? Jose. That was easy. There were 2 questions about Tim Pool's eventual response to my videos about him. I don't know if this is actually happening. These 2 questions are all that I've heard about it. If Tim Pool wants to defend his work, he's more than entitled to. My main concern is that I'm worried he won't understand my video. If he were to respond at all, he'll try to defend individual points and say, I was wrong about this, I was wrong about that, and try to argue in that sense. And that misses the whole point. My video wasn't about the content found in that specific week so much as it was about how Tim delivers his content more broadly. I was looking at his methods, the way he frames issues, the way he just repeats conservative talking points, and the way he just gives you a superficial understanding of the stories he reads. For example, I noticed a lot of people were pushing back on me about the California bill that affects freelance employees. I actually have no opinion on that because I've not really researched it. Maybe I should have made that clearer in the video. My point was that Tim is trying to present a very specific perspective on that bill that reinforces a conservative narrative. It could very well be that that bill is awful and does terrible things. That's not what I was interested in. I was more interested in how Tim was dishonestly framing that bill by omitting certain key facts in the story he supposedly read. If he actually responds to my videos in a thoughtful way that actually understands the point I was trying to make, I'd love to see that. Not holding my breath, though. Last question, and I'm so glad the last question is so good and such a valuable insight into my thoughts on cat girls. If someone is a cat girl, I respect their identity and to identify as a cat girl. I value and respect you. And on that lovely note, the Q&A comes to a close. Thank you to all my patrons for helping make this happen, and getting to 35,000 subscribers by my second year of having this channel feels pretty good. Pretty good. I hope more people will be watching in the future, and I hope I can continue creating great content for you guys that you'll all enjoy. If you'd like to be one of these lovely people whose names are scrolling up the screen, consider heading over to my Patreon, where I hear we got 2 new rewards for people on the $5 tier. So check that out. And of course, you can head over to Twitter and follow me on there. If you enjoy this channel, you can also subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, or ring the bell. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I hope to see you all again soon.